Stellar Fundraising Auctions presents Black Tie and Tails, brought to you by Sojourn Ventures and Greater Giving, and featuring your hosts, fundraising auctioneers Greg Quiroga and Devon Bell. Welcome to Black Tie and Tails, where we take you behind the scenes of the wonderful world of fundraising auctions to tell tales of triumph and tragedy.
Of masterpieces and misfires.
Diamonds and duds.
Phenomena and flops.
Bellwethers and bombs.
Successes und shit shows.
Because that's what kind of show this is going to be. We have a combined 30 years experience between the two of us on stage, raising money for nonprofit organizations all over the country. And I think it's safe to say we've seen some stuff.
Oh, yeah. Good and bad.
We've seen some stuff. And so in this episode and every episode, we're going to share some of that stuff with you, give you a chance to come backstage, get a feel for what it's like to be at a fundraising auction, good and bad. And my name's Greg Quiroga with Stellar Fundraising Auctions. I've been doing nonprofit fundraising since 2004. This is my compatriot,
Devon Bell. Hello.
Devon and I... on the outside chance, a lot of things, but on the outside chance, Devo, that someone listening has never heard of our niche, has never been to a fundraising auction before, how would you describe your job? What is it that you do?
Well, I am a fundraising and benefit auctioneer, thanks to Greg, who brought me in 10 years ago. So he had been in it 10 years and brought me in. Now he's in 20 and I'm in 10. And we'll have a party, a fundraiser, a benefit, a fancy gala, who knows?
Could be a soiree.
Yeah, there you go. Only one way to pronounce that. And we, as a part of the program of the evening, we will raise money for an organization. Maybe an auction, maybe a raffle, maybe a fund a need, maybe a game. Lots of auction to it.
Lots of auction to it. Yeah, lots of auction to it. And it's an interesting world. It wasn't when I went through the high school graduation career counselor list of possible jobs. Fundraising auctioneer wasn't on the list. It didn't pop up. Although what's funny is I run into people from back in the day, and they're like, "Oh, this makes complete sense for you." Like now they understand it,
right? Because neither of us would shut up.
Right. which brings us to the perfect point, which is why what are the goals of the podcast? Like why another podcast? And because I mean, for starters, there obviously aren't enough podcasts in the world. And
what the world needs now
is two more middle-aged white guys with microphones on the AV deck having a good time. I was joking that I was trying to get my card to get into the middle-aged white guy club, and they wouldn't let me in because they didn't have a podcast yet. So
perfect. After this, we're going to play pickleball.
So the goals of this podcast, like number one goals, I want this had to be fun, right? Like if I wasn't going to be fun, and hang out with you, and how long have we known each other now?
12. So that is 43 years.
Fourth grade.
Pretty much.
Since fourth grade. Mrs. Mendy's class.
That's right.
And we both escaped that class, but under different circumstances.
Oh, I didn't know you had left that class.
Yeah.
I remember I skipped a grade and Ben Aguilar came and carried my desk out.
Yeah, you left me. You left me in that horrible class all by myself. And that was Devon tested out, like found an error in the math book, and Ms. Mendes didn't believe you.
I don't even remember that. How'd you get out?
I got expelled for excessive absences.
Well, that's one way to go.
But I mean, there was good. My younger brother's deaf, and he had he had speech therapy every Tuesday afternoon, and there was no way that my mom could drive. Didn't have a car. Too much information. But there was no way my mom could get me and get back, and I wanted to be there for speech therapy, so I just stayed home for speech therapy every Tuesday, and subsequently got expelled. Which is, my mom called me. I was visiting my father for Christmas in Miami, and my mom calls me, and she's like, "Greg, I've got some bad news." And I'm like, "Yeah?" She's like, the school district just called and you've been expelled." I'm like, "Well, what's the bad news?"
That is a good punchline right there. That's a punchline. That's funny.
So the goal of the podcast is to have fun, right? And obviously we do that. Tell stories, give you an inside look, share information on how, like, hopefully in sharing these stories, there's some educational content to it, right? I mean, there are behind the scenes of every one of these fundraising auctions, there's a how to, or maybe how to not in some cases.
You can listen to our horror stories so you don't have to live them yourselves.
Well put. Well put. And I think the number one goal is to not get sued. So in that respect, we're going to change the names of events and organizations, and we will never name anyone or any donors, any of that sort of stuff, because we work with people at their best, and we want them to feel comfortable in the milieu in which they're operating, to feel safe, having a good time without knowing that their auctioneer is taking notes and is going to later on put it on a podcast and share it with 5 people. This episode, the first episode's theme is sounding off. And one of the things, how important is sound to your job?
Sound is the crucial link between what it is we're trying to impart and a bunch of people who are partying.
And without sound, auctioneers by definition are orally based, right? It takes a good sound system to make our jobs work. And so the first story we have today it goes back to the first event I ever did. It was 2004, and I was too naive to know all the things that could go wrong in my first fundraising auction. I just didn't know. And this was for an education foundation on the peninsula. And education foundations tend to have like a bunch of different schools all as part of one education foundation. So it's not just like one school group of parents. It was 5 school group of parents, which means it's a massive event, like 700 something people. And parents, when parents get together for their school auction or for a fundraising auction, they cut a little loose.
Yeah, remember, these are parents who, for day after day, week after week, month after month, see each other in their sweats for 5 minutes at drop off, and they say, we should hang out, we should party sometime. And now it's the event, and oh my gosh, everyone's dressed up, they're drinking alcohol, they all have a sitter, and they tend to make up for lost time, as it were. Very much so.
And so we're at the Marriott in Burlingame, which is a lovely, lovely space. Big anyway, can hold 700 plus people. And they had just installed brand new speakers in the ceiling. They'd put in new cans. And I'd worked AV in this hotel before this, different job, different life. And so I thought these cans are great. And so we do the sound check in this empty room with me and the sound guy there, right. And it sounds amazing. I'm like, listen to my voice, 500 now 6, and it's booming, and I sound awesome. And I'm thinking, woohoo, this is going to be great. And then the room fills up with people, and right as we're about to get going on the program, I realize I haven't eaten. So I'm like, okay, ironically, I had never done a fundraiser. I'd never been to a fundraising auction before I decided to do my first one.
Front and center.
Yeah,
first one.
Just no shortage of confidence in this one. So I'm barreling full steam ahead, and I hadn't eaten, and I realized, oh my gosh, we're going to do the auction during dinner, and I'm no good when I'm hungry. I'm no good. So I went into the green room and I begged a steak off of the band, and ate this huge steak and potatoes right before I went on stage, which is as
I don't like where this is going.
Bad an idea as one can have. And so get back out on stage and ready to get going. And the executive director for the Education Foundation gets on stage, and the crowd can't hear him. Can't hear him, and he's talking, and so we realize that these cans, they're built for conventions where you're there to hear a keynote speaker and you care what they're talking about.
Right, a silent, attentive crowd, not hundreds of people partying.
Yeah, 100, like almost 1,000, right? Almost 1,000 people, and so he's trying, everybody going, knocking on the microphone and everything else, and so eventually we get the band to loan us their sound system, and basically they have this ginormous 2 stacks massive speakers aimed right at the
That's what I'm talking about.
But they're aimed right at the dance floor. Like they create this like really tiny area of great sound. So they move turn the entire speakers to fame out to the crowd. So now we've got like a couple of bands of sound that can be heard. And so we go ahead and but enough of the crowd can hear that for it to be worth going for it. So the auction gets going and the room is really dark.
Oh, great for an auctioneer.
And the paddles are clear plastic.
What?
They're clear plastic, and I think my job is to muddle through. Like, I am here to make this work no matter what at this point. Like, we're already 45 minutes late. I'm here to make this work. So I go ahead and move in. I'm like, oh, well, the Education Foundation, these are like a hoity-toity crowd. So I move in increments that one would never move in. I'm like, open the bidding at 500, now 1,000, 1,500, 2, 2,500, 3.
Open at 500 and jump to 1,000.
I mean, in $500 increments.
At 500, we would usually go up by like 50
or
maybe 100.
Yeah. And the crowd panics and comes with me. And so we wind up raising this record amount of money, and I come off stage and my wife is there and she says, wow, that was a lot more work than I thought. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what you think I've been doing. I was doing other auctions before fundraising. I don't know what I was doing, but I tell you that steak did not sit well.
I was going to say, it was a lot of work from the outside. You should have checked it from the inside.
the diaphragm cramp on my ability to talk was really challenging. But B, it was like way to like check all the boxes for lessons on the first auction, right? Like I learned immediately that sound is the most important thing, and without it, especially with a large and partying crowd,
yes,
there is no chance in the world of managing to pull off a successful event.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we have experienced everything from, like you said, oh, here's your AV guy. It's the manager of the room. And here's your AV system. It's cans, or cants, I guess we would say in this case. And it's a knob on the wall to turn in real time. So, hey, if it's not loud enough, don't worry, we can turn this knob. But then all the way to a full production setup with everyone has mics, and it's funny that you sound checked and everything was perfect with an empty room, because I'm sure you do as I do now, which is we sound check and then I say, please no, change me in the moment, because right now is not the same as right with hundreds of partying people who were trying to shush, and right, they're clinking on glasses trying to shush each other. So
yeah, now I ask the sound guy, we got headroom? you got room to turn this up? Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, I'm a screamer. So I yell and hoot and holler, and it's hard to do that. It's hard to recreate that energy when I'm sound checking. So sometimes I'll say, don't worry, you won't have to turn me up that much, because I'm going to yell at the top of my lungs.
You make it sound so inviting. Black Tie and Tails is brought to you by Greater Giving. Greater Giving is user-friendly nonprofit auction software that your event attendees will understand and your staff will enjoy using. Greater Giving makes accepting and processing credit card payments a breeze, provides a mobile bidding platform so you can engage more bidders, can be used to run golf and sporting events, peer-to-peer-a-thons, luncheons, and more, and is 100% PCI compliant. Best of all, you can do unlimited events with one annual fee. Go to greatergiving.com for more information. So I know, Devo, that you've had your own issues with sound at some point, and I know just recently you had an event that had its own sound challenges.
One that I think that you're referencing from a recent event was...
Yes.
It was one of those events that's in a big, beautiful space, and the dinner and the live program is in space number 1, and downstairs is where they have the reception.
That's right.
Everyone's in a different space. They have a different band down there. They have a bar down there. Everyone, different appetizers, right? Everyone does their thing. So there's a moment where we have to get all the cats herded upstairs, get everyone to stop partying downstairs and come up so we can get the program going. They had asked me if I would do some voice of God stuff to help facilitate that process. Yes, no problem. Voice of God is when we're saying, ladies and gentlemen, our program will start in 5 minutes. Please make your way to the dining room, or the silent auction closes soon. Just kind of the telling people the lay of the land with the
VOG work for the insiders.
That's right. VOG. I think it's called VOG work. Anyway, so I was doing VOG work, and we sound checked and everything was fine. And, I have you do too, right? We have the wireless Countryman, like a headset, the Garth Brooks, the Britney Spears,
the Madonna.
There you go. So we usually use that so that we can, our hands free to gesticulate a lot. So we sound check and everything's fine. And it comes time for the voice of God for the downstairs. And I tell them, I won't set up my Countryman for this. You can just give me the mic, give me any old mic and I'll use it. And they say, well, I mean, it's an empty room. And I went, no, for downstairs. And they told me, no, that's a different sound company downstairs. It's a completely separate sound company down there. So I go downstairs. Okay, we'll work this out. Well, maybe we'll use their setup. And I go down there, and yes, there is a PA system, and yes, it is amplified, but it's all instruments. There's no singer. There's no mic. Unless I can, you're
gonna riff them.
Unless I can play the go.
Is that Eddie Van Halen's cover of "Go Home" now?
Right.
Make your way to the ballroom. I believe that's "Make Your Way to the Ballroom."
Kenny G's song "Going Home" is known by 1 billion Chinese people because that's the song they always play when it's time to go home.
Interesting,
but that's not going to work here at my event.
Right.
My choice is to. Whatever. What can I do? Go down there and yell? No one's going to hear me. I can do it through the PA and no one's going to hear me because they're all downstairs. So it ended up working out, and it was because, number one, it was one of those organizations that wasn't full of parents with a sitter, right? It was one of those organizations where people have been on the board a long time. It's an older crowd. It's kind of a more staid crowd. And it's a Thursday night.
Oh.
Very different vibe on a Thursday night where it's people aren't necessarily partying and staying out late, and people got to go to work tomorrow. So what we ended up doing is belting it out upstairs and sending all the volunteers through to get the cats herded, as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just never know. You can't measure enough times before you cut with the sound. I think you'd agree.
Yeah, and speaking of yelling,
and we were.
Speaking of yelling, I did an event outdoors, and this was like not my first event, but like my second or third. Like there was a theme. There was a theme. So my first event, I learned like, okay, the sound system's important. My second event, it's outdoors at the Napa Valley Museum, which it doesn't lend itself to doing events necessarily outdoors. There's there's a parking lot, and from there's a ramp that leads down to a patio area, and then alongside the building is another little narrow patio space. And so we had 4 or 5 10-top tables in the space alongside the building, a bunch of highboy cocktail tables in the other patio area sort of off on that direction, and then at the top of the ramp we had lowboy cocktail tables. And
they're faking the funk. It is not an outdoor venue, it's just outdoors.
Just outdoors. And most importantly, I asked, I was learning. I was like, so how's the sound system? And my client said the magic words that I've learned are now one of the biggest red flags in the world, which is, oh, what could go wrong?
Wile E. Coyote, genius.
We've got a sound system. What could go wrong? And so I show up. And I grab the microphone, and it is a lone microphone plugged into a single anchor speaker it's a self-powered speaker that it's barely bigger than a bread box, right? And we're talking like heritage bread, not like, small, like it's barely bigger than a bread box.
Audio by Fisher Price.
Right? A speaker goes boom because I start doing the auction, and that's what happens. It blows up. It literally explodes. It's just stops working. Just literally dies. And so I'm standing there in the mic like, and nobody can hear anything, right? And so I was younger and had better pipes back then, and also I just didn't know any better. So I jumped up on a planter and I told all the people in the parking lot behind me, like, you're gonna have to come down here because you're not gonna hear me. And I stood there and yelled the rest of the auction. Did I fail to mention this was a 30-lot auction, 35 lot auction?
30 lots is maybe like hour and a half, 2 hours. That's a long
it was
run.
It was a long auction.
Yeah.
And we were on like lot 5 when the speaker blew. Like the speaker took itself out
with your one mic into a box.
Yeah.
Like you're like the dude saying the end is nigh outside on the corner.
Right. And the end was not. And we managed to tough it out and get through it. But it was early, like, those lessons, you remember, like, it's really funny the way that we're built as humans to remember the negative so readily, like, and it goes back to that whole, like, it's not just fight or flight, it's freeze, fight or flight, right? Like those are the first 3 instincts. And so you come around the corner and you see the predator and you're like, oh my gosh. And
fight or fiasco.
Yeah, right. And so then you're like, oh, should I, right? And so but you remember, never walk around that corner again, right? Like that. And so I've done a lot of fundraising auctions at this point. And I remember a lot of good ones, but I never forget those fiascos. Those things are embedded because genetically, you just don't want it to happen again.
When you're telling the story of your event, you don't want one of the sentences that describes it to be, I jumped up on a planter.
So how was the event? Well,
after I jumped up on the
my
planter,
balance is good, and thank goodness for that.
All right then. Well, this podcast, folks, is brought to you by Sojourn Ventures. When you need to add a little travel spice to your lineup of auction items, check out Sojourn Ventures. They curate trips to Italy, Bali, and now Spain as well at reasonable consignment prices. They offer over a dozen curated packages that include round-trip airport transfers, full-body massages, where's my paddle, daily breakfast, in-home chef dinners, and much more. Your buyers will enjoy top-level concierge service and 2 full years to redeem their trip. All of this at reasonable consignment prices.
Check out sojournventurestravel.com or look for the link in the bio of this podcast. Without going too much farther down the rabbit hole, I feel like we hit pretty good. You got any final sound advice?
That's sound advice, Devon. Let's think. I think we hit on a lot of it. Again, sound is crucial to your event. Make sure that you give it the requisite energy, because if sound doesn't go right, then the people aren't hearing what you're saying.
And I think it's important to note that this isn't just for us as auctioneers, right? Like us as auctioneers, yes, we want to be heard, but it's not just because we like to talk, because obviously that's the truth, but it's also because we do this because we want to help nonprofit organizations raise as much money as possible. And if we can't be heard, then the potential that your committee and your crowd have spent so much time, the potential that your committee has spent so much time building up, and the potential of your crowd does not get realized. And so having good sound is the number, like, it's in our riders. Like, it's in our agreement. It says, well, you should have a good sound system that can do this, because if not, why bother?
That's right. Yeah. And I think you said it. We want the event to succeed. I feel like what we trade on in a live event is there's an expectation of giving. You have a room full of people who support your organization. They want you to succeed. They want to give. They want to help. And part of what we do, and part of what everyone on the gala committee does, is make that process as easy and gratifying and low stress as possible. And if they can't hear what you're saying, then none of that message is getting through to them. So, yeah, put sound at the top of the list, yo.
Oh, I forgot. No. We have to go back. We're going to have to put this in as bonus content. I need you to put on your headphone for a minute.
Okay.
So while we're talking about first auctions ever, I wanted to to do something that I thought you would appreciate.
Bocce ball party. 8 people will enjoy an inimitable Italian feast and an elegant.
So the sad part was, the challenging part was, you were reading a script I wrote.
Also challenging that I had never sold an auction lot in my life before this night in 2014.
This is Devon's first auction lot ever.
And here we go.
And we're going to start at $400. 400. I have 400, 450. 450 and 500, 550. 600, 650. Who will give me 7? 700, 650.
I am hanging on by my freaking fingernails at this point. Right? I feel like the world is tilting. You know.
950. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
$1,000. 950. Who will give me $1,000? Thank you, sir. Not $1,000. Who will give me 1,100? I have $1,000.
Bumped up the increments.
Nice, nice.
A seasoned pro.
Who will give me 12? $1,100. Who will give me 12 for this delicious meal? And
Greg, I remember you telling me the story of going to auction school, and the first thing you ever auctioned off was a salt and pepper shakers for 25 cents.
It's true.
So
we'll give me 13.
how funny that the first thing I auction off is bocce and a gourmet meal for at least 13.
$1,300. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
$1,300. I've got $1,300, and I'm looking for 14.
But the job is filling space with words, right? And in that sense, you're doing fine.
What I learned from watching you, because at this point I was practicing my Greg and Ed imitation, is it's enough to say the numbers.
Right.
You can just say numbers. You
Right.
don't have to say other things. Right. And your little jokes can go in between.
$1,600. $1,500, ladies and gentlemen, going once, going twice. Sold.
Dun, 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 dun.
But that was, for a first time out of the gate, that was good.
I appreciate that. Thank you for putting me on the spot. I'd love to play a recording of Greg's first auction, but the technology didn't exist back then.
We had scribes who were engraving it in stone as I was auctioning, but they couldn't hear because it was cans. Oh, that's great.
Good stuff, you know.
Thank you for listening to Black Tie and Tales. You can find our podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, and all of your favorite podcast distribution channels, or you can find it at blacktieandtales.com. Once again, that's blacktieandtales.com. Be sure to tune in next time for
Agents of Change.
Ooh.
Dun, dun, dun.